people. One of the parents is a teacher, and she's the president of our board now, and she's Latinx. She's incredibly creative, and she brings all kinds of ideas. She serves on a couple of other boards. Um, we have another parent who is a psychologist. Um, these aren't people with deep pockets, but they have connections. Um, we've involved the parents in a parent group that's helped with fundraisers. So, like on a grassroots level, we have people who are involved in making sure that their kids have all of the things that they need at the center. Um, and we have 6 Latinx and 3 white people on the board. Um, and one of the members has a father who's uh, uh, I'm going to say this wrong. He makes films, uh, cinematographer, and uh, her father-in-law is a lawyer. So there's a lot of connections that we have, even though we don't have the deep pockets. Uh, we, we're still looking for some of those deep pocket people to be on the board, but we're building with what we've got, and we have grown, and we feel like we're stronger now than we have been in a long time. So it's just getting those parents involved, and they have far more connections than I ever dreamed that they would have, even though they maybe don't have very much money and their economic situation is very limited. That's all.
What what do we want our board members to do? Obviously fundraising, right? But in that conversation, should part of the role of an El Sistema board also be to push forward the social justice that we're not seeing in our community? And in that case, okay, I know what are your thoughts on changing the the face of our board, the experiences in our board to change the social dynamic and to also change our board? Am I making sense?
What I'm hearing is are we thinking about developing new processes to go with the new idea of having all of these new exciting people of color on our boards? And for sure, I think that, defining the roles and expectations of board members has always been really important. And I would say in most places, at least places that I've been involved, including places where I've been on boards, that has not been very well done. I think that a lot of board members don't really know why they're on a board. And so I think that for everybody, board development starts there. It starts with defining, or revisiting what your mission is, and what your vision is for your organization and for your community. And then making sure that the stakeholders that are sitting around the table have answers to those questions.
I'm
And
going to suggest we move into breakout groups for this discussion. We've reached now, I think, a critical mass where being able to speak one-on-one with one another would be really helpful. So I'm just going to move us into breakout rooms, and let's keep this topic of board development and recruitment, the idea that Jessica put forward of what really are we looking for in a board member, and are there ways to perhaps change the traditional expectations of boards in our El Sistema organizations. Okay, here we go. We'll meet back here in about 20 minutes, and then we'll report back, and then we'll move on to succession planning as the next part of the conversation. Hey, Whitney, can you hear me? Whitney?
Hi, Katie.
Hey, Kathy.
Do you know I have to have surgery on Tuesday?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
I might be a little bit out of it. I tore my rotator.
Ah,
It's shoulder surgery.
I'm sorry.
So I just wanted to mention that to you. I may be a little bit out of it for a little
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry.
bit. What-
And Jessica, I want to hand it back over to you to lead us in perhaps a sharing out group discussion about board development, and then we can move into executive succession, which actually already started to come up in my group.
Well, we talked in our little breakout group about how to bring the community into the board, and how board members or administrators can take themselves into the community more and meet people there who could come and add their voices to a board session, even if they don't join the board on a permanent basis. So it was very helpful to look at non-business models for board recruitment. And anybody else from that group, please speak up if you wish.
I was in that group and I mentioned just first of all, with this space that we're in right now, more people of color should be in this space right now for this conversation to be able to then have further conversations. And so making sure that we invite everybody in as much as possible, because there are people out there that would be interested in being in the board, Um, but we need communication, education about what's possible. And also, you guys pointed out the definition of what a board member is, and kind of looking at that from a non-development side, and trying to figure out how people that have been economically disenfranchised could be a part of your board, because if they're coming in right away, they're not gonna come in with the money in their pocket right away. So first and foremost, getting more people of color in the space to be able to have the conversation to let you know where they could fit in the board.
What about some of the other groups? Katie, I don't even know how many groups there were. So,
There were 5. So, Christy, you want to share from our?
Yeah, sure. In our group, we had a teacher as part of our conversation. Carol, so it's nice to meet you, Carol. We were talking about how I think it is important to hear teacher voices as a way for us administrators to hear more from community on what is needed for the organization or from the community side. Teachers are the ones who spend way more time with community for the most part. So teachers, I think, have an important role in board recruitment and helping to understand more globally what is it that the community needs. The other thing we talked about is how a lot of the focus on board recruitment is on fundraising. And we were speaking, Ellen was also in our group, we were speaking about how that can be really tough, especially when you're trying to raise more funds. And whether it might make sense to sort of look at fundraising as something that is an administrative task more than a board task in some ways. So that you could focus your board development on other skill sets other than just fundraising. So people aren't being disqualified from joining boards or having a voice in the organization simply because they're not wealthy or don't have connections, which is a lot of why, boards can say, well, we just need to have fundraisers and we just need to recruit the right people. And those people often end up being rich white guys. So if we can kind of take that factor away to a certain extent and say that fundraising is something that is a paid job that somebody on your admin team is going to do for the most part, and that you're going to have a handful of board members who might help with fundraising. It might be a helpful way to kind of think about how the skill sets of board members need to be varied and not just focused on fundraising, which is why they end up primarily white and male to begin with. So that was kind of what we were talking about. Did I miss anything, Katie or Ellen or Carol?
Okay. You did mention, I brought up a concern about leaning on a stressed community to then, be the support group for the stressed community, and and feeling like, wait, we don't want to say, we're offering to give what is needed, but we want you to be the giver. And then it was brought to me, well, make sure you just keep the opportunity open. And I learned from Jane, our director, that the way our structure is at Elm, there's a strategic planning committee that has, hard-hitting, heavily invested parents and community members on it. So it's a way to not say, okay, now go fundraise out of this very community that needs the support. So I appreciated that broader view, since I'm not all that well-versed in how the boards are structured between even our own, but between the other groups. So I appreciated that. Oh, one more thing that you brought up, if I can just jump in, was, and I'm looking at the array of us here, was that there a lot of administrative, essentially white women saying, I should step aside. It's not the white men who are saying they should step aside. It's the women who are saying I should step aside and make room for people of color of either gender, and that there's a sort of an inclination toward that, and then it was also brought, but we don't want to diminish the importance of a woman's voice.
I think that would be another interesting question for the next survey research done on ELSA STEMA programs is gender in relation to leadership. That would be an interesting demographic to explore as well. Okay, so we've heard from 2 groups. Katie, do you know what number group were you guys? 1? You were 1? 3. Okay, so who's group 1? Does anyone remember who group 1 is? Or Katie, do you have that list?
I don't. Becky, why don't you speak from your group?
Okay. We kind of just shared out just thoughts in general about boards and board recruitment and leadership, and the focus on trying to diversify a board without necessarily understanding why somebody wants to join your board in the first place. I can just speak personally that people who are on the Empire State Youth Orchestra board right now, which gave birth to a STEM-inspired program, tend to be people who are either alums themselves and therefore have like a passion for the organization already, or are friends of, right? There's that idea that a board kind of spawns more of itself because they reach out within their own network. I wish I had a fundraising board. That's not the focus of our board. So we don't bring people on just to raise money. We bring people on who have a passion for what we do. And I think that we struggle with diversity right now from a race perspective, like, diversifying beyond the white woman or white male, because I don't think that we truly have become part of our community in the way that we would like to as an organization, to the extent that members of our Chime community, I think, are still receiving from us instead of truly being part of the dialogue of what we do. And that's work that we want to engage in and that we want to be better at. But what I shared is that it's not a quick overnight process, and that we're both trying to be patient and urgent and be, reflective and proactive at the same time as wanting it to happen now. And it's not like you can just overnight suddenly become one with your community that you're hoping to be part of, that there's a lot of listening and learning that has to happen. And unfortunately, that takes a long time or some time. So that's kind of where we're at. And then I think we just sort of went around and shared out, kind of everybody's different experiences that we're having in our own communities. Yeah, I don't know. Gabby, did I sum that up kind of? Laura, I think, was in our group as well.
Yeah, I think you did a great job.
Okay. Kalita, go for it.
So I think that if anything's going to actually radically change, we have to radically change the current structure of how nonprofits are governed, how they're looked at, what the strategies are, and then people that make the decision to run one. If you don't have no friends that are Black, Brown, Latinx, Indigenous, then make some friends. I mean, it feels, a lot of times it feels like the conversation is so foreign, and it's like, well, I kind of want to do it, but I don't know. It feels weird. It's listen, okay? If you don't jump in and do it, then you're going to keep having these same conversations. There's no miracle pill. There's no miracle water. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Sit in that discomfort. We continue to sit in it every day. Every day, I am largely uncomfortable with going into spaces of the work I do because I know that I have to get myself together. I have to keep my attitude together. I can't be aggressive. I have to make sure my phone and emails aren't shouting. So I say all that to say, challenge your board of directors, challenge your budget. I mean, it's going to take radical change. It's not going to be these incremental, well, let's add 1 or 2 Black people. Well, this pastor who's really great at this, or, you know, like it's got to be radical because it's radical movement that really shifts the energy in the earth. It gets people's attention. A lot of people are uncomfortable, but they're like secretly, I want to radically change too. I don't want to tell anyone, but I want to radically change. So just do it. Like there's so much red tape, rip the red tape off. The majority of the people on this call have the power to do that. I do not have the power to rip the red tape off. Now I can walk through it, but I cannot rip it off. So if y'all rip it off, then I can walk through it and I can help you with the journey, but I'm not ripping that tape off. I'm not putting my life out there like that, but I encourage you to be radical. Like these conversations are very safe. They're very nice. Everybody gets off the call. They're like, oh my God, this is so good. Be radical and don't stop. Like don't hang up today and not feel the tightness that I feel every day in my chest. Like don't hang up and be able to go and make a coffee or go grab a martini. Like if you are comfortable when you do that, then nothing's changed. Like be radical, be crazy, because what we're living right now is chaos. It's complete chaos. And you know who's suffering every hour of every day right now? Our babies. Every single kid right now. Every single kid. And if we don't get radical, our generation right now has nothing to fight for. So you have to get radical. You have to be willing to look at the structure in place, dismantle it, start over. There's nothing wrong with starting over. We're so scared to start over. We just have to keep everything the same. Like start over. It's okay. That's what life is about. It's about mistakes. It's about failure. It's about building up. But if we don't change this, then we are the ones that are the problem and not the solution seekers.
I just want to say my name's Kathy Rad, and I'm radical, and I'm being like Nike and just doing it already.
Kalita, how are we supposed to talk about anything else after that?
You are supposed to.
Thank you. Well, and I mean, truly, where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Okay. Truly, if we're reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed, if we're reading Playing for Their Lives, isn't that what El Sistema is supposed to do? Aren't we supposed to be radicals? Aren't we supposed to push? Aren't we supposed to be champions for change and change?
One of the things that we talked about in our group really briefly, and I don't know if we're going to do breakout rooms on this, Katie and I specifically in leadership positions for our organizations talked about whether white women in positions of leadership need to step down from their positions and make spaces for people of color and especially for Black women. And that's something that I have been thinking about a lot personally, especially in the last month or so, but definitely even before that, something to think about for myself, whether I'm taking up space that should not be space that's taken up by somebody like me, who has privilege and who is not part of the communities that our organization is serving in the way that I should be for my position. So, you know, I think that's a really difficult conversation. I think there are also, Katie right away said, sure, but it's the women who are saying that they would step away. And that may be true, but, you know, nevertheless, I still feel very conflicted about being in this role at this moment for sure. That's where I'm at personally.
I would say, and I just want to clarify, I'm saying that totally from a position of women, like a passion for women's issues, having done zero research on how many white men are stepping down from their jobs.
I was going to say the guy who's running our Chime program is a white man, and he wants to step aside too. So just speaking for the white man that's not here.
White man. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very, I would say he would say exactly what Chris just said. He's been very uncomfortable with his role right now as a result, and just really is questioning where he should be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure I'm not the only one. I think there's probably a lot of us, but I just wanted to put it out there because I think that it's something that needs to be addressed, the whiteness of leadership in El Sistema programs. I know we're all here to have a conversation, and I know that we're all here to do work in this area, but I also look at my screen and I see that it's mostly white people. And I just want to be really recognizing that that's not good, because those are not the communities that we're serving. At least in our program, it's not.
So how would you prepare, Christy, for your succession? How would you prepare to bring a person of color into your position? I think I keep in mind a lot of the things that Khalida and Raja spoke about in our listening session, which is to prepare a person of color into a position where they feel safe and supported, and in a place where it's not putting them into a position of trauma because, one, they're the only person of color there, or they're, walking into an environment where they feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. For us, it's around board development. Absolutely. I think that we have work to do still on board development so that it is a safe space for a person of color to be in a leadership role. And I think also, to an extent, preparing our donor base, which is also predominantly white and wealthy, to make the connections, to make those introductions and help forge those relationships in a way where that person is going to be safe to express their vision and their mission in a way that's very supported by the organization and by the donors, because you can drop somebody into that position, and if they don't have that proper support going in, it can be very, very detrimental for them and building those relationships. So, I mean, I feel like that to a much lesser degree was the case for me going into a position of leadership after there was a male in the position before me, and how there was a lot of expression from donors that they would be not comfortable to give funding to a young woman, and they pulled their funding. So if that's what happened to me, and I'm a really privileged person, I would worry that that's something that could happen to a person of color to a much larger degree.
Christy, thank you for speaking with such transparency. I reached out to you, so I would love to have this conversation, but this has been on my mind for quite a while. And I think it's like so many mixed emotions because, you're in the middle of a pandemic and you wouldn't want to resign at a time that's so uncertain, and in a time where racial equity is such a focus. And so, I'm definitely committed through this year, but beyond that, I really don't know. And this has definitely brought that to the forefront. At the same time, I went through, and this is a safe space, I think this is being recorded. Okay, well then I had a board member who, I think went rogue is the easiest way to say it, and just got really control hungry, and basically implied to a lot of people that I was leaving before I had given any type of notice. It was more like, well, you're going to leave in the next couple of years. And I was like, that could be true. I'm not going to deny that. And so, long story short, I started getting all of these calls as the founder, like, what? How are you leaving your own organization? What do you mean you're leaving your own organization? And this was before I'd even said anything. And so it's kind of put me in a place of fear and feeling like the need to please others as the biggest reasons for clinging to my job. And those aren't the right reasons. And Christy, I think what you've said so beautifully is that, yeah, this is really an opportunity for someone else. I think the question that I would love to discuss, whether that be through a listening session or another forum or something, is not only how do you make the person stepping into power feel comfortable, but how do you make the whole organization come from a place where they're not fearful and they're open to change. Because Christy, what you said about being woman, I know would be exacerbated a million times, which is really sad, but it's the truth with a lot of our donors. And then, you know, the thing we would say is like, well, if they're not aligned with our values, then we're not going to give. So I think that would just need to be an explicit reason as part of a resignation letter or communication that goes out. But I would love to discuss that further.
I'm new to the ED role in my organization as of like a week and a half ago. And, you know, this question has been really eating me too, Christy, and I just really appreciate you bringing it up. And I don't know, I just want to admit the fact that I don't know what the next right step is, and if that means that, like, what stepping aside would be, and I don't know how to prepare for a succession, or like I don't know what the right thing would be. So I'm openly admitting to this group of wonderful people that this is a tough area, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot. So thank you for Sarah and Christy for speaking to that too.
I just want to put in a word for the positivity of succession planning, which is, Whitney, you have an opportunity on day one of your new job to start planning for your succession, so that there's no void, there's no, you know, there's a vision for a smooth handoff for the organization on and on and on into the future, for forever, for the future of El Sistema Colorado. So it was funny to start today's conversation when people are sharing, well, I might be leaving, there's like fear. I would encourage to not, it doesn't need to be fearful. It can be really wonderful for the organization.
Has anybody does anybody have a clear plan in place, like with their board, that's vocalized, that's come to life? Has anybody successfully put something in place yet?
No, we need to, but I just wanted to say that if you think you can do I have no desire to leave, and the only reason I would plan for succession is because I keep, you know, if I died or something, because I have the passion to do this, and whoever has the passion to do it and the drive and is diversified in what they do, there should be no reason for them to want to leave. I don't care if you're what color you are. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, Persian, Jewish, whatever. I just happen to come from a family that's Jewish, Christian, and I married somebody from Iran. But anyway, I just think if you have the drive to do it, the only reason I'd want to go is if I might die, or if we did find somebody who could do a much better job than me, because it's for what's best for the kids and the family, you know. And I just wanted to say that it shouldn't be thought about just because there isn't somebody there. That's just how I feel. I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Kathy. Kalita has been unmuting herself. So Kalita and then Ariel.
I can appreciate that everyone is feeling very anxious about the idea of stepping aside, but anyone that steps aside from their program, it doesn't mean anything if your board of directors still carries the same energy about our children. You might as well stay where you are. If you're going to do a succession, that succession plan is having a conversation with your board. That should be the starting point of that conversation of a succession plan. Is to have a conversation and be transparent and make sure that they actually are down for our kids. Because if they're not, it would be more dangerous for you to leave. Because you're leaving our kids out here to drown with a knee on their neck. Let me just make it real plain. So don't bother leaving if they will continue to perpetuate the oppression and the marginalization and the invisibility. If they're on the same page with you about why you feel it's important to, and maybe it's not necessarily leaving. Maybe it's you're going to do work on a curriculum that makes space for Black and brown composers. Maybe you're shifting roles. Maybe you're not leaving, but you're elevating the voices of Black and brown educators, teachers, leaders in the community that have not had an opportunity to serve in a meaningful, impactful way. So it doesn't have to mean, oh my God, I'm gone. No, because if you leave and your board is still racist, that's it for our kids. But if you have a conversation and you say, listen, first of all, do you all want to fix this? And then if they don't want to fix it, you have a much bigger problem on your hands, and you can utilize my services for consulting, and maybe we can have them come together and work that out. But if they see where you're coming from, then you can really start to do the work where it's a harmonious experience. So you don't have to exit. Everyone's voice is important. It's just what level of elevation, what level of sacrifice are you willing to put in so that the voices of people like myself and Kay and other Black and brown leaders across the country are elevated and empowered and can speak out and not be pushed down, or that's too Black, or that's too loud. So I just encourage you to, rather than just throw in the whole tile, have a conversation with your board. It starts with your board, and it starts with your funders, because your funders are racist too. I'm gonna go ahead and put that out there. If you have funders that are telling you, okay, here's $50,000, but you can only use this much for operating, and you can only use this much for the music, and you can't use any for food or anything that they might need to actually be successful as musicians. So you got to check everybody. That's a responsibility in these leadership roles. You got to check everybody's nose, because everybody's nose stinks on some kind of level. I will never sit here and blame anyone on this call or anyone else in the world that wants to do better. It's a shared responsibility that has to be broken down into smaller bites. This did not happen overnight. It will not be solved overnight.
And be radical.
Ariel, you have your hand up as well.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ariel from Johannesburg, South Africa. It's PM, it's over 8 p.m. and winter here, so I'm in my bundles. I'm on final graduating class of the Systema Fellows program, and since then I've traveled, consulting, working different projects, and I'm currently back in South Africa. And thank you everybody for sharing your thoughts and your experiences. One particular organization that I've been advising, and I was a product of this particular project over 25 years ago. And the woman that started and ran this project was white, foreign, and very isolated. And the student body that this particular organization served looked very different in the late 90s, just when and around the time that Mandela got released from prison. And demographics have changed, politics have changed, economies have changed. And it was only in the last 2 years that a new executive director stepped in, and somebody who is South African, who's male, who's colored. So the children relate to this leader figure in a very different way. The parents relate to him in a very different way. And through this process, the board has also changed. And this board of directors has taken time. It's approached from a bottom up versus a top down. And it's taken many, many listening circles with the students, with the parents, with the teachers, forming different subcommittees, forming different task groups. South Africa has the highest Gini coefficient in the world. And to do any form of outreach, community communication, any form of education-related work, on top of, this very, at least in South Africa, a huge swing towards the science and the maths is really challenging. And, in the breakout groups that we heard, I know in terms of the landscape is no less challenging, on top of now COVID. So I think my little bit is to, I think, encourage everybody to continue listening to the voices who oftentimes aren't the loudest. And I think those are really important. And I think it's important to listen to our students. And sometimes we may not be the best person that they're willing or comfortable or can speak with. So oftentimes I find maybe a trusted community leader to get their input. Yeah, and I think it's, we are who we are. We do the kind of work that we care a lot about, and not to be apologetic about it. And that know that this work came before us and this work will continue long after whether or not we are around. And I think I was sharing with my group that, to be a leader means to lead, and to lead means taking risks. And somebody had mentioned earlier, to really not fear making mistakes and not fear making failure, and being able to still moving forward with even more sensitivity and even greater audacity. I think that was one of the greatest things that I experienced about our system, is that the spirit of experimenting and continuing with what we have at hand. So yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Katie and Systema USA for hosting this platform. Wonderful to connect with everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. Thank you for joining us. It's wonderful to have you here from South Africa, and your perspective is appreciated.
Thank you.
Hey, we've got just a few minutes left, and I think Handea has had her hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo Ariel. Thank you for bringing that up. In our group, I shared as well, we have a student who is now in college and is looking at the business and looking into business and trying to be a leader. And if the succession planning isn't starting with you training those students, then none of this is going to change. If you are not having your students shadow you in every orifice of this program, as an administrator, as a board member, as a leader, none of this is going to change. Me being a foreigner, I always look at the way the El Sistema came to the US. A lot of people, you study the music side of it, but really go back and dig into the history of what was happening. So if El Sistema was backed by the government and it was being run by people from Venezuela for people in the communities of Venezuela, then you already have identified part of the problem. Because I brought up the fact, and Jessica, we were going back and forth, and Jessica kind of alluded to the fact that, when El Sistema was brought to USA, yes, it was funded, and the whole project started at NEC. But myself, I wasn't, at the time, how many people of color were involved in that cohort at NEC to be able to get that information? And then it fizzles down after that, because the networks that came from there were from those people who were in that cohort and their networks and who they knew, and so it built. So knowing that that's the case, and knowing that El Sistema is a unique type of nonprofit situation, you have the opportunity to scrap everything you know about a general nonprofit. You have the framework of the nonprofit, but you can create whatever you want, because you already created the programs to be whatever you want in these cities where you are. The other thing is, a lot of people have come from all across the country and are now settled in places that they are not natives of. I happen to work in an organization that I grew up in Baltimore. So I'm working in an organization that's serving the students that I understand what they're going through or the neighborhoods they live in. But there's a lot of people on the boards, administration, our teachers that have no concept of what the neighborhoods and just different things that are happening, like why we had to create the system of like getting our students from the east side of Baltimore to get to know the students from the west side, because even though they're in Baltimore, there's still a divide with even those two sets of of neighborhoods there. There's so many things that we have to impart. Part of the thing is going to be training the next generation. So I know that my student may not ever have the opportunity, if I don't train them, to become a board member or in this in any of these organizations, in any part of the arts organizations ever, unless we create that space for them. And then another part is opening up the opportunity to people outside of ELSA who are art administrators of color who could come in and actually be people to be a part of the conversation, because you have people out there with expertise and stuff, but they might not be necessarily involved in El Sistema at all, because El Sistema technically just came about. You know, there's people from DCYLP, there's people, they're products of all of these great organizations all over the place that may be exactly the people you need to be in these boards, but because they're outside of our framework and our network, then they haven't been involved in the conversation. So right now, I think we have the chance. You guys brought up, we don't have a program to show right now. I mean, we have footage, the old footage and all that stuff, but right now is the time to dig in and reanalyze and reassess and figure out how we can actually impact the students that we have and let them turn this whole thing on its head in the next 10, 20 years, because we're starting to see the first generation of students go into college right now. And they have what it takes, because they understand the program and what it did for them, to be able to push El Sistema, to change the whole face of the El Sistema as well, and push it forward. As board members, like Ariel said, from the bottom up, if you approach it from the bottom up, they're the students, they were the youngest ones. And they now, if we give them the tools, they will run with it in the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You're here.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you all for coming in today. Thank you for being willing to put yourselves out there and say some things that might make you feel uncomfortable, or some of the fears that you've been thinking about. Katie, do you have anything you want to add for everybody before we go? Any announcements or?
No, just these third Friday forums will continue on the third Friday of every month. Kandea, I hear you. It is time to open up our circles. So I'm going to make a commitment to doing that. These forums, specifically the third Friday of every month, are that moment to bring in like the community, the artists that you want to get to know more about El Sistema, or the teacher or the parent or the whatever. I'd love to see these forums really open up and become what we had hoped would be, which is a much more open space for people from all places within our El Sistema inspired program. So students, parents, teachers, board members, program directors, your development director, you lucky people with administrative assistants, those people. Would just love for it to be an open forum, because as you have heard, the conversation can be so rich from every place within our organization. And even though we're talking about board development and succession planning, so much can be informed from the different perspectives that all of these people who love our El Sistema programs can offer. So let's open
Can you remind us about that in the next Evite?
I will. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. All right. I think this is a conversation that should continue. So if you have thoughts, if there are things that you want to do, I think email us, get a hold of us. I'm going to put my email in the chat right now. And I think we can probably find most of each other online too. But yeah, I think not only chatting, but also doing is really important. So let's support each other going forward. Let's, we can use this forum to check in, get ideas, and go out there and make some radical change.
Please send your topic ideas to Anne and to Jessica.
Mm-hmm. And I put my email in the chat space. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to hear from people like Kandia, who have students who actually are entering college. We have a handful of kids who started with us when they were 6 years old, and they're just getting ready to go to school. And I'd love to chat with you, Kandera, a little bit more about how you are helping them and supporting them.
Yeah, no problem. Kalita does have that student at her college right now. You all might know her, Asia Palmer. She just completed her freshman year at Hart College, Hart School of Music. So she is there. And she's studying business management. She chose that on her own, as well as studying flute. So that's what she wants to do.
Awesome. She sounds like an excellent board candidate for El Sistema USA.
All right.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Great to see everyone. Take good care. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.